In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Welcome to Strange Bedfellows, episode 18. I'm your host, Lori Spencer. Rick Walker is finishing up Maverick News as we speak, and he'll be joining us soon. We're going to do something a little bit different tonight. In light of the world situation, we decided we wanted to have a discussion about the Israel-Palestine conflict. And, you know, this war, the Israel-Hamas war, is the deadliest of 5 Gaza wars for both sides. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry said yesterday that 4,137 Palestinians have been killed, more than 13,000 others wounded. More than 1,400 people in Israel have been killed. In addition, 203 people were believed captured by Hamas during the incursion on October 7th, taken into Palestine. That's what the Israeli military says. Now, the release of 2 American hostages yesterday is hopefully the start of more to come. A number of foreign nationals among those kidnapped by Hamas, including many from the U.S., Mexico, Canada, Brazil, and Thailand. Information about the status, the location, the identity of all the hostages still remains pretty scarce. Some have been identified by their families who recognize them from online videos, sparking desperate pleas for their return. As this war swiftly escalates and Israel prepares for a full-scale ground invasion, the tragic human toll continues to mount. Tonight, on this special edition of Strange Bedfellows, we endeavor to understand both sides of this complex and emotional issue through the eyes of our 2 esteemed guests. The Palestinian perspective tonight will be explained by our friend Don Dubar, journalist and political commentator based in New York. He covers international relations and U.S. government, law, and politics for Pacifica Radio, Russia's RT television, Iran's Press TV, and, of course, the Maverick News Channel. You've seen him here several times. Israel's point of view will be represented in the second hour by Arkady Itkin. He's a civil litigation attorney in California. He grew up in Israel and served in the Israeli Defense Forces between 1994 and 1997. Arkady can be seen as a weekly commentator on Scott Ritter's U.S. Tour of Duty channel and also on our friend Kevin Michellizi's American and Crimea channel, also a member of our Maverick News Network. And I'd like to bring in our second guest, Arkady Itkin, a friend of mine that I met over at the U.S. Tour of Duty channel with Scott Ritter. How's it going, Arkady? Great to see you.
How are you? Thank you for having me, guys. I don't have nearly as much to say as Don, but hopefully it will be useful and thought-provoking.
Oh, I bet you do. Well, when you debated Scott Ritter, you hardly got a word in edgewise. So I wanted to bring you in. It's hard to debate Ritter. He talks very loud and very forcefully, and yet you defended your position so very well. And I thought it would be a good way to get this conversation rolling, to show people a little clip of that debate. Now, this was like a long debate. You and Scott went at it for about 2 hours last week. And if anybody missed it, I'm going to give you a taste of what went on. And boy, this was pretty hot. Take a look, guys.
And also want to let you know, we have another podcast on Monday nights called Scenes from the Evolution. And one of my co-hosts is Arkady Itkin, who is a veteran of the Israeli army, and he'll be joining us now for a debate with Scott. Now, this we didn't really plan this or organize this. It's going to be very informal, and I don't even know how Arkady feels about this article that was just published, but I do know a few days ago, Arkady mentioned to me that he disagrees with some of Scott's first comments and tweets. For example, there was a tweet that Scott posted on October 7th, blaming it on Bibi Netanyahu, and Arkady had some objections to that, both, I think, in terms of both tone and content, but I'll let Arkady explain. Before we get to today's article, what was it that initially upset you the other day, Arkady?
I don't know. I have a lot of respect for Scott. Hello, everyone. And I felt like he's happy about what's going on. I'm sure he's not, but I almost felt like some kind of bloodthirst in the tone. And so that initially upset me. And as someone who really likes to provide context into the Russia-Ukraine conflict and telling all of the world that Putin didn't just wake up one day and did what they did, I wanted to hear some context about Gaza being open for many years and being closed and all the horrible things that Hamas has been inflicting on their people in Gaza and on Israel and keeping them oppressed and wasting their aid on God knows what instead of turning Gaza into Singapore, which it could have easily become. And I'm saying all that without justifying all the horrible things to which Palestinians have been subjected to. And I have a few other specific disagreements with what Scott said in his recent streams that I could share on demand.
All right, I demand it. What? Please be specific.
Okay, so Israelis don't call Palestinians animals, okay? So except a few psychos, extremist settlers that most Israelis don't like either, we only call Hamas and other terrorist animals because that's what they are. They're monsters. They do terrible things, and it doesn't achieve anything. Palestinians have legitimate grievances with Israel, but the majority of them are of course not murderers. There is a reason Gaza is closed. Not only by Israel, but also by Egypt, and Jordanians don't seem to be welcoming them either. Gaza used to be open. Israelis used to go there, shop there, vacation there, without addressing whether Israel stole the land or not in 1948, whether they have the right to exist or not. They don't enjoy keeping Gaza locked up. They feel like they need to. It's a terrible situation, and Israelis don't enjoy it. It's a huge burden on them financially and militarily. Now, a lot of people, I think, including Scott, recommend a two-state solution. My question is very simple. How do you create a two-state solution when you have a group within Gaza with whom even the West Bank doesn't agree, who say we don't want two-state solution, we don't have equality, that's not enough, no deal, from river to the sea, Palestine is going to be free? What is your solution if you had it your way? That's my first question. My second question is, if Mexicans decided to say that we want our land back and they started walking through our border and blow buses up and stab random people and blow up, they have the rightful right. What would America do? Would they fly over Mexico and start bombing them, trying to minimize collateral damage? What else would they do? I don't know.
All right, before you respond to that, Scott, the other day you probably remember, I can't remember if it was a military leader or a politician who was widely quoted as calling either all Palestinians or Hamas terrorists animals. And I asked you that question. I said, Scott, are you sure he's referring to all Palestinians? And you said, yes, you think he is. Nonetheless, I think Arkady's point is he doesn't necessarily speak for all people. But how would you like to respond?
Well, first of all, I would say that nobody speaks for all people. That would be sort of the say. But he is. Let me ask this to Arkady. When you heard that statement, did you immediately call whoever you have contacts with in Israel and demand his resignation instantly? Did you immediately call somebody and say that man speaks for all of Israel and he just humiliated us by articulating a cognizable war crime? Because that's what he did. Did you ask for his resignation, or did you do what every other Israeli did and sit there and say, hell yeah, bring it on. It's time to get revenge. And my gut feeling is, I mean, I'll let you answer for yourself, but having not heard anybody else in Israel demand his immediate resignation, my gut feeling is that most Israelis, overcome by the emotion of what happened on Saturday, were like, yeah, bring it on. It's time. It's payback. Payback. And that's the feeling I get from the Israelis right now. They want payback. The problem with payback is payback, the way it's being done right now, is a war crime. And there's no way to justify a war crime. Never. Eder, if I ever hear anybody say, we get to do this because of what happened to us, I say, you've lost all moral authority at that point in time. A war crime is never justified, and professionals should know this.
But
So
what specifically is the war crime, Scott? Calling people animals or something else?
Collective punishment is the war crime. No ifs, ands, or buts. They are bombing the living shit out of 2 million people. They are slaughtering innocents, and they know this. Look, Arkady, I don't know what you did in the Israeli military. I don't know what it was. I worked with Israeli intelligence, and I have a lot of respect for the professionalism of them. I will tell you right now that they know damn well that Hamas ain't occupying the 6th floor of the apartment building that they occupied back before this conflict. They know that Hamas went underground. They know that Hamas isn't teaching a class in the university. And yet they blew up the university. They leveled it. They leveled the apartment blocks, and they're killing thousands of people, hundreds of children as part of collective punishment. They are trying to create the conditions to compel 1 million Gazans to flee North Gaza so that Israel can move in. It's a war crime. It's a war crime, plain and simple. No ifs, ands, or buts, but nobody is talking about it because it's payback. It's payback.
Boy, I tell you what, Scott Ritter has taken an abrupt turn. He's gone a full 180. You know, this is a guy who used to work with Israeli intelligence, was very pro-Israel. Just last week, he put out an article saying this is why I no longer support Israel. And he's turned, I mean, just today, he put out a tweet that even shocked me. And I love Scott dearly, but I mean, his emotions are involved. The tweet said, fuck Israel, damn them all, God damn them all to hell, was what he said. So Arkady, I know you didn't get a chance to say much in that debate with Ritter. You did your best. It's hard to debate that guy. So I wanted to give you a chance to come on the show tonight, spend an hour with us. We promise not to interrupt. And let you tell us, from your perspective, because you grew up in Israel, you served in the IDF, and I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. Thank you. And feel free to interrupt because I want to answer as many questions. I also want to say that Scott Ritter, I thought, was remarkably easy to debate. I think he was less aggressive with me, which I appreciated too. So I actually listened to Dan and Rick's debate. I'm siding much more with Rick. Almost every question that Rick asked and every response came into my mind. But let me say by way of introduction that my views are very typical of a mainstream Israeli who is non-religious, not settler, not too fanatical one way or the another. And by that, I mean not someone who wants the whole thing or someone who wants to give everything away. I'm your average, mainstream, typical Tel Aviv, maybe slightly away from the left Israeli. And I don't want to be pro-Israel. And I don't want to be pro-Palestine. I want to be pro-solution. Now, one thing, if you ever travel to Israel, you will see, it will be very refreshing to you, is that the majority of Israelis recognize the problems they have, the problems that the Palestinians have. They want solution. They recognize the injustices, the historic injustices that occurred to Palestinians. Also, you will see many wonderful things. I think we have Maayan here who talked about Israeli Arabs, how many of them do so well in Israel, how many Palestinians live quite well in Ramallah and Nablus. And I haven't been to Gaza, but it's not all bad and it's not all dark, especially during peacetime. There's a lot of things to be proud of. And there are a lot of people get along. Palestinians, when things are peaceful, when the checkpoints are open, they come, they work, they make a good living, they go back home. They have nice lives. Now, do they have all the rights that they should have? No, it's an issue and it needs to be addressed. Freedom of travel, freedom of employment, freedom of purchasing real estate in this area versus this area. Are settlements that are expanding an issue? Absolutely. So from my perspective, both sides are right and both sides are wrong. And I see two problems. I've been thinking about it over the last few days. I see two problems. Number one, this Zionist, homeland-loving, Bibi-type attitude of, I'm going to make it really hard on the other side to negotiate anything. I'm going to try to get as much as I can out of this deal because I got to protect my Jewish state. This has to be Jewish state, the Zionism. The other side is Hamas. Like I mentioned with Scott, they don't want equality. You just saw this interview. If you had any doubts when you played that interview with the Hamas leader, They want war for the sake of war. Their charter calls for decimation of Jews, period, not
It
just
does.
Israel.
Literally
Then you
does.
hear chants from the river to the sea. I went to this nice vigil in San Francisco the other day, and all of a sudden I hear glory to the martyrs. Are you kidding me?
Hmm.
I mean,
I can't imagine how that would make you feel when you hear that.
I mean, the delusion, and I mean, to me, it looked like a circus. I mean, I'm used to it, but to hear it in San Francisco from white people who couldn't find it on a map, who couldn't find Gaza on a map, glory to the martyrs. Do you understand what you're saying? So, two-state solution that everybody's talking about. How do you achieve that if you have a group, at least one group, that says we will not rest our arms until Israel is over, and the other loftier goal is the Jews are over? Now, Golda Meir said something back in the day that's still true. If Israel puts its arms down, there will be no longer Israel. There's no question about it. If the other side puts their arms down, there will be peace, no question about it. I'll just make caveat, peace, but there will be issues of discrimination, of certain issues relating to occupation and non-equality of rights between Israelis and Palestinians that will have to be worked out. But there will be no violence. Let me address a few things that Dan says. I reject any justification of what happened on October 7th. Not a single time an Israeli soldier or whatever went on the streets with a machine gun and started shooting random people or going into houses, kidnapping people. Is there police brutality? Sometimes. Are there incidents among Israeli army? Absolutely, yes. Just like in any other military. Is there collateral damage when you're walking around with a gun and you're arresting people, you're searching for people who cause problems, and you accidentally shoot the wrong people or you bomb the wrong people? Absolutely. Like in any war. So there's no justification for what happened to October 7th because it was disgusting. It was completely unproductive. It achieved nothing. It only caused a lot of harm to everyone, including Palestinians. I reject any type of comparison to concentration camps. Are you kidding me? Are you really being literal? You're comparing people who were starved and gassed for nothing to some issues, some legitimate issues that Palestinians have with the freedom of travel and freedom of rights. Sounds to me like a bit of an exaggeration. And it doesn't help the credibility of people who compare it to South African apartheid and puppeting all these terms like apartheid and concentration camp. I like what Rick Walker said. We need to be pragmatic, and I want to be pragmatic. Bibi probably has to go. Hamas has to go. Bibi will be gone sooner or later, one way or the other. I don't know if Hamas will be gone. Let's see what else I wanted to address. This leftist attitude of justifying horrible things, like justifying looting and rioting during George Floyd riots, or justifying October 7th, saying that you have to look at it in a context. No, when you do that, you can justify any crime. And I'm against it. I don't want to justify crimes. Now, let's look at what Israel does. What are the options? One option is to do nothing after what happened. They know very well, based on history, what will happen. The vultures will smell blood and they will attack them. The other option is doing what they're doing now. I'm not sure what it's going to achieve. Is that a good strategy? I don't know. Apparently, that's what countries do when something like this happened. That's what we did during 9/11 on a much larger scale. I don't know what they're planning and what the outcome that they're looking for and how they're going to root out the ideology. Maybe they want to inflict a serious blow to Hamas, and they're hoping that it will, if not permanently disable Hamas, at least it will significantly weaken them and will discourage them from doing something like this in the future. Now, one more thing before I'll ask you to ask any follow-up questions. If you go to Israel today, despite everything that happened, you will be very surprised to see how little hate there is from Israelis toward Palestinians. or Muslims or Israeli Arabs. If nothing, there is empathy, there is compassion and understanding overall. Of course, there are crazies that, they lost. Also, there are people who lost their loved ones in these horrible incidents, and that translates into hate. But in general, despite all that, Jews in Israel have very little to no hate toward the other side.
Rick Walker, you want to chime in with a follow-up?
Well, I just want to address that comment that was up on the screen about Canada turning away the Jews. There was a ship with 900 people, Jews, that came from Germany. It was turned away from Cuba. The United States turned it away.
That's
Canada
right.
also turned it away. Canada has acknowledged it. We've embraced the shame of that, and we've apologized for it. And we did accept many Jews here in Canada.
Accepted a lot of Ukrainian Nazis too, as it turns out.
Well, a lot of Ukrainians, not necessarily all Ukrainian Nazis, but if you want to continue hunting dead Nazis, you might find, a few dead ones. You might find a couple of living ones. The guy you found in Parliament is 98. And, that war has been over for quite a while. And, we can keep dealing in sort of cliches and relitigating World War II, or we can find solutions to the problems today. And unfortunately, this whole narrative about the Nazi in Parliament has honestly given cover to some of the actual Nazis that are present today, who want to exterminate the Jewish people in Israel. They're hiding behind this narrative saying, see, you're calling me a Nazi. That guy's the Nazi. The government's the Nazis. Well, they actually are the guys that we really need to be worrying about. Unfortunately, that's the unintended consequence of a lot of the media attention that's been focused on this very thing. It's going back to revisit the past when we've got a really serious problem in front of us right now, and it's masking it.
Well, not to dwell too much on the past, but I am a historian, and I think it's important to point out. I was going to say it while Don DeBar was here, but we ran out of time. And you probably know this history because you're from Israel. In the Second World War, the Palestinians, the Arabs, were Nazi collaborators. There was a guy named Amin al-Husani, the Mufti. He was a good friend of Adolf Hitler and the top Nazis, so much so that the Palestinians were declared honorary Aryans by Nazi Germany. Basically, al-Husani, I liken him to the Stefan Bandera of Palestine. They were fighting the Allies for the same reasons that Bandera and the Ukrainian nationalists were doing it. They were doing it for the promise, maybe a promise, although Hitler never actually made them the promise of independence for their state, for their people. That's the reason the Ukrainian nationalists joined forces with Nazi Germany. That's the reason why the Palestinians, the Arabs, were fighting on the side of the Axis. Also, people say, well, that's ancient history. It doesn't matter now, but it does. Al-Husani was a mentor and a cousin of Yasser Arafat. And the Muslim Brotherhood and the PLO and all that started there. To this day, folks, in certain sectors of the Palestinian resistance, al-Husani is still looked upon as a hero, and Adolf Hitler is still looked upon as a hero. Would you like to comment, Arkady?
Yeah, very interesting information that I've become recently aware of too. I don't want to label and I don't want to believe that Palestinians are real Nazis, but to the extent that they've been brainwashed through cartoons, through movies, through the pictures of martyrs on every wall in the West Bank, and I'm sure in Gaza, to hate Israel and to hate Jews for every little thing. If that makes them Nazis, maybe. But going back to this issue of property, all this discussion with Dan about property rights that we created the rules in the West, and who was there first. Again, it's not productive. It's not pragmatic. Just like people wouldn't like if Russia said, well, Kiev became Russian in 1667 or whatever, when it was conceded in the war with Poland. Going back 3,000 years, 50 years, 100 years is unproductive and it's not pragmatic. It doesn't solve the problem. Just like Rick said earlier, Jews have to live there, Palestinians have to live there. And back to what Scott said, with which I agreed, we need to find compromise. And compromise will be possible if one side decides that they don't want the complete extermination of the other side. I don't care how many people out there call Israel genocidal state, ethnic cleansing. No one is looking to genocide Palestinians. Israel needs Palestinians. I'm sorry to sound so condescending. They need the labor for all the major construction. They need the farmers. They need the people who work. They need the workforce, if nothing else. Now, are they going the best way about achieving whatever goals they have with regard to Hamas? You can argue about that. Are unfortunate things happen when you have this conflict? Sure. Genocide, ethnic cleansing, to me, it's a joke because I've been there. Once you step foot on that land, a couple of days later, you will be rolling eyes if you ever believe that. Like, how could I ever believe that?
So on the inverse of that, we hear from the pro-Palestinian side that, and there's the comment right there on the screen, that Israel, the Zionists, are the current day Nazis. What is your response to that?
There is a group of settlers that are very extreme, that believe that they're entitled to be somewhere over everyone else. Many of them come from America. If that makes them Nazis, possibly. To label the entire country as Nazis is ridiculous, and it's not even worth addressing. And any person who feels that way, they owe it to themselves, if they feel that strongly, to travel, to talk to Israelis, to talk to Israeli Arabs, to talk to Palestinians. Many of the Arabs and Palestinians will be afraid to talk on the camera. They don't want to be on the camera. No Israeli is afraid to be on the camera. Bring it on, right? And then it will clarify their own misconceptions to them.
I want to show you a clip here from the commander of Israel's Defense Forces, of which you were once a member, talking about the ground invasion that they are preparing to launch into Gaza. This is pretty intense, guys. Take a look at this.
עכשיו, התמרון הולך להעביר את המלחמה לשטח שלו. ואנחנו הולכים לנצח אותו בשטח שלו. זה הולך להיות קשה, זה הולך להיות ארוך, זה הולך להיות אינטנסיבי. טובי המפקדים של הצבא פה, טובי הלוחמים של הצבא פה, המפקדות הכי טובות שלנו, הכוחות הכי טובים שלנו, אתם. אני מאמין בכם אמונה גדולה, שלמה, אמיתית, יסודית. אני מאמין בכוח, במקצועיות ובעיקר ברוח של כולם, שתביא אותנו לניצחון.
Defense Forces, they'd be sending you into Gaza. Your thoughts on this ground invasion?
I'm very concerned. I don't know if it's the best option, but is there a better option? I don't quite understand what they're trying to achieve and how they're going to go about it. Is it a suicide mission? Is it worth it? Is it worth sacrificing a lot of people in an urban warfare, which is guaranteed to be very difficult and full of surprises? Is carpet bombing buildings, hoping that you're destroying infrastructure and maybe killing one Hamas leader here and there? Is that productive? What, Hamas is going to run out of people who they can appoint as leaders? I don't know. I'm hoping that I don't know enough to appreciate what they're doing. But what other options do they have? What are they supposed to do?
That is the question.
Yeah, somebody says it's a trap. Yeah, it's possible that it's a trap. They knew all along, 100% Hamas knew that in response to October 7th, this is exactly what was going to happen. So that makes me feel that it's more likely or not some kind of trap.
It does feel that way. It feels like they are walking right into a trap because, of course, Hamas is underground. It's the civilians who are above ground who are suffering and dying in such crazy numbers. I think we're up to, over 4,000 in the last 2 weeks, which is more than twice of what Israel lost in the October 7th attacks. Those numbers are only going to grow. Rick, did you want to jump in on this?
I think that that's probably not a totally inaccurate assessment. And I think that Hamas is quite willing to sacrifice as many people as it takes, whether they're suicide bombers or people that they put in harm's way by inviting an attack like this, by doing what they did on the 7th. Because this is, as much as anything else, a public relations war. And sometimes in a situation like this, you can win by losing, because you become a martyr. You become the victim in the eyes of international opinion. And if that's what happens here, and I believe that it largely is, then support for Israel will diminish.
Right.
You could see military support be pulled, at which case, as I've said before, when that happens, Israel will cease to exist, and the mass genocide that Hitler always dreamed of will become a reality. That's what we're facing.
Let me address a few comments here. Emoji says, if you need their labor, they deserve full civic rights. I 100% agree. If they stop stabbing every day, shooting, blowing up buses, and, you could say, well, they're doing it as part of resistance. I understand. The bottom line is that it has been happening every day. When I moved to Israel, buses were blowing up every single day. And 50 people were just splashed. Random people, not necessarily soldiers, who have nothing to do with what's going on. Okay? So, and Screw Google says World War II Germany was and is referred to as Nazi Germany. Current day Israel does to Palestinians exactly what Nazi Germany did to European Ashkenazi Jews, if the shoe fits. Tiny bit of an exaggeration. And again, it takes to travel there to realize how ridiculous this sounds.
Well, when you talk about Nazi atrocities, and let's remember that the Palestinian resistance during World War II was trained by, they had Waffen-SS. I think they had about 12,000 Palestinians serving in the Waffen-SS in the Middle East. Where did they learn what they do? And I just want to remind people, to be fair, what happened on October 7th, because boy, people sure seem to have amnesia about the savage brutality that we saw. Whether you agree or disagree with the 40 beheaded babies story, leave that out of the discussion for a moment. Let's talk about the other 1,400 victims. I'm going to play you a clip here. This is a young woman, an American, who was at the music festival, and she managed to survive the onslaught, but she spoke to her local TV station in New York yesterday and told a harrowing story of what she saw and what she survived.
Meanwhile, the Hamas attack on the music festival in southern Israel, it killed 260 people. It left so many others wounded. But we are now hearing incredible stories of survival. This is from people who attended that very festival. Natalie Sanandaji of Great Neck, Long Island, she was there when she literally ran for her life when rockets began flying overhead. Yesterday, she went to Washington to tell her frightening story to members of Congress.
All right, this morning, Natalie is here with us on Good Day New York. Thank God. You're safe and sound. I'm sure your family must be so happy that you're home.
Yeah, they're definitely relieved to have me home.
Okay, so what happened? You went to Israel for a friend's wedding, and you were looking forward to this concert. It's something that you were planning to go to.
Yes.
Describe that day. Is it first of all, I should ask you, is it okay to ask you to describe what happened?
Yes, honestly, I feel that possibly as a response to the trauma, I feel a bit detached from the situation, but I think it gives me the power to tell my story over and over again without breaking down. So it is okay. I can go into detail about it. At around 6:30, I was at the festival. I was one of the only Americans from all of my friend group there. Everyone else was Israeli. One of the girls had come up to me to explain to me that some rockets had been intercepted overhead. She was very calm about the situation. She said that it's normal for the area that we're in. This happens sometimes. It might just be a few, and then hopefully the party will continue. Try to imagine anywhere else in the world where a festival is going on and young kids see rockets intercepted over their heads and they think, oh, it's fine. That wouldn't really happen anywhere else in the world, but this is a reality for most Israeli citizens. They've been in bomb shelters countless times in their life. After a few minutes, we obviously realized this isn't just any other ordinary situation. The rockets just kept coming and kept coming. Eventually, the security of the festival had turned off the music, asked everyone to evacuate to their cars. As we're evacuating to our cars, we still had no idea that there were terrorists on foot so close to us with guns. We thought it was just rockets. I decided to go to the bathrooms by the festival exit area before we went to our car. A few days ago, I saw a video surface of the terrorists going to those exact bathrooms and just shooting at every bathroom stall, trying to kill anyone who was inside. That was one of the hardest videos for me to see since surviving this massacre, because I was in those bathrooms moments before. And if I was there moments later, I might not be here today. After we got to our cars, the festival security tried to get everyone to safety to the best of their ability. Most of them died doing so. Eventually, they asked everyone to pull their cars over and get out of their cars and run. And at first, we couldn't understand why until we first heard the first gunshots. And that's when we realized that being in our cars and being in such a condensed area with so many cars made us a very easy target for the terrorists. We got out of our cars as soon as we heard the first gunshots. We started to run. Nobody knew what direction to run in. Nobody knew what direction was the direction of safety. Kids were running in every direction. One of the most terrifying things was running in a certain direction, thinking that I'm running to safety, and then seeing dozens of children running in my direction, realizing that they're running from a terrorist, they're running from being shot at, and I now have to make a split-second decision and run in another direction and try to save my own life.
Talk to us about once you felt like you finally got to a place where maybe you could be safe. Did you feel any relief at all?
Honestly, it took about 4 hours until we got to safety. At a certain point while we were running, I remember passing by a ditch with maybe 10, 15 kids hiding in it, and they told me and my friends to come hide with them. And we almost did, until one of my friends said, if we hide in this ditch and the terrorists come from above us, we have nowhere to run. We ended up deciding to continue running, and we later found out that all the kids who hid in that ditch did get shot and killed. After about 4 hours of running, we decided to sit under a tree, get some shade. We've been running in the sun for hours with no water. A white pickup truck is driving in our direction, and we're sitting with about 10, 15 other kids, and I remember looking at everyone, and we all kind of, our first reaction was thinking, this is a terrorist coming to kill us. And we kind of all like half got up and then realized, where are we gonna run to? We have nowhere to go. And we kind of all just like sat back down and accepted our fate. If this is a terrorist, then that's it, this is the end. Thankfully enough, it wasn't. It was a man from the nearby town of Patish, which is the town that we were told to run to. He left the safety of his town and he came towards all of this, risking his own life to save innocent children. I never even got to thank him. We all got into the back of his pickup truck. He dropped us off in his town. And as soon as he dropped us off, he turned right back around to risk his life all over again to save more kids. And I wish I could thank him.
You can. You have an opportunity right now to say what you want to say to him, to someone that risked their life to help save yours.
If he's seeing this right now, then I just want to say thank you, because if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Wow. What did you want members of Congress to know yesterday? And what was that experience like?
It was quite surreal. I never thought I would be in such a position, speaking to people with so much power. And I just want them to know how much Israel needs their support right now. That our enemy...
Did you talk to the president? Is that you and the president? I can't say.
No, I spoke to the second gentleman.
Okay.
So what I wanted them to know was how much Israel needs their support, and how much Israel's enemy is also America's enemy. We're fighting against a terrorist organization that is being supported by other terrorist organizations that have attacked U.S. soil in the past. And from speaking to them, I think most of them understand that, and I think that most of them are there for Israel and are going to support Israel.
Natalie, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I'm sure your family is so happy that you're back.
Yes.
We're happy that you're back, too.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Safe and sound, and prayers to everybody.
Thank you.
Who you were there with.
And I know prayers to a lot of people that are back, but they're going back to Israel.
Even a lot of my friends who survived this massacre have now re-enlisted in the army to fight for their country and are risking their lives all over again.
Yeah.
And I just pray for them.
Yeah. Natalie Sanandaji, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely harrowing to hear that. And I've heard, over the past 2 weeks, story after story, especially in the small villages, not just at the music festival, but when they talk about forcing people into a ditch and shooting them to death. I read a lot of World War II history, guys, and even pre-World War II history of the pogroms that happened in Ukraine and in parts of the Soviet Union. That's what the Nazis did. That's what the Ukrainian nationalists did. They would round them up, take them out, put them in a ditch, and kill them. Arkady, in your long history in the Israeli armed forces, did you ever know of the Israeli army doing things like that to Palestinians?
The bad thing they do, we do have an element of extreme. They're usually, ironically, they're usually Sephardic. The people who look the most like Palestinians, they also tend to be very patriotic. I will die for Israel. I will do whatever it takes. So they can be a little bit hateful, or a lot. Usually it's more bark than bite. They can be a little bit harsher, a little bit more rude, but to randomly shoot people, first of all, you're going to jail for a long time. You're going to be investigated. You're going to go to jail. Nobody's going to be dancing and celebrating. When that happened in Ma'arat HaMachpelah, there was a mass shooting by an extremist Israeli. Nobody was celebrating. That's a shameful mark on Israel's history. So absolutely not. So
why would they want to repeat what was done to them? And yet there are many who say that that is what the Zionist state of Israel does today, is that they say that hurt people, and that maybe they are acting out the horrors of the Holocaust upon the weaker Palestinians.
So let me address that. You can accuse them of expansion beyond what they should be expanding under the law. You can accuse them of having questionable claims to that land in the first place. And we can debate that. And then the second part that you mentioned, I'm sorry.
I was just asking about revisiting the Holocaust on their Palestinian neighbors.
So no chance of that. However, the response now, this extreme response that people refer to as retaliation, can potentially be a product of survival mode, which is caused in part by the PTSD from Holocaust survivors, from the Holocaust, plus all the other wars, all the other attempts by their neighbors to decimate them and to wipe them off the face of the earth. And this is a survival instinct. So we cannot relate to that. This country is 50 times bigger. We have way more space. We don't have enemies who do this to us right next to our houses. We cannot really relate to that.
No,
so,
we can't.
No.
Thank God. I mean, I hope we never have to relate to that. Sometimes I wonder, though, when I see the direction that our country is going and how divided we are.
I wanted to address the protests because you guys were showing them. There's a remarkable lecture called Why the Left Hates Israel. Remarkable. From Ayn Rand Institute. And one of the premises there is very simple. The left supports the underdog. No further questions asked. BLM, trans, Gaza, Palestine, women. If there's an underdog, they're going to come out, especially if George
and
Soros.
Don't forget Ukraine, right? You got all these woke leftists marching in the streets going, Slava Ukraini, because they are the underdog against big bad Russia.
No further questions asked, no context, no reasons, no detail, no nuance matters. And if George Soros tells them to come out and chant and gives them nice flags and flyers, they're going to be out in every city whenever he tells them to. And this is a very dangerous approach, not to take nuance and context into consideration.
Absolutely. Rick? Do you have a
I
question?
would go beyond that, and maybe you want to comment on this, Arkady. I would say that it's also this anti-Semitism, this rise in anti-Semitism that I think is present in the left-wing political ideology. You know, the oppressed versus the oppressor. If you view Jews as the money changers, the people who control banking, the people who control media, they are the elites, they are the oppressors. And so if you subscribe to a socialist or a communist ideology, it's very easy, therefore, to then just look at the Jews as the oppressors. And that is why you're seeing the left so willingly align themselves in a very strange way with this neo-fascistic Nazi way of thinking, or even ideology and action that we're seeing.
It is so strange, isn't it, Rick? It's
It does seem strange. That is, I'm in my view, that's why, because they look at them as the oppressor, because they're being subjected to the same kind, like this information online, this information warfare. It's like, as I said before I came on here, over on my other broadcast, people are being fed this new language. They're changing the words so that a word like elite will soon be, and I'm seeing it already among certain even live streamers, like people like Stu Peters, right? Who are interchanging the word. They're going to change that word elite.
It's a euphemism for Jews.
Jew. It's right. Because, oh, look, they control it's the age-old story, right? Oh, they control the banks. They have all the money. They control everything. They control the corporations. They control the government. They're the oppressor. And so that's how they channel that anger, right? It's propaganda, and it's very powerful right now. And when you play with the language, the way I would say, Lori, when I say communist, people on the left, I'm really referring to a certain strain of it. Not every.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay? It's a strain.
Let's not forget that the Red Army liberated the concentration camps.
Well, yes, but also, you go back in again, shades of gray here, right? Everything is not black and white. And anti-Semitism was rampant around the world. It was way worse.
And in the Soviet Union,
back in the 20s. It was everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere. That's why that ship that I just mentioned, it was turned away from multiple countries, not just Canada.
That is correct.
It was everywhere.
Yep.
To just single out a single country or a single group of people, it's just not fair. It's not
the United
accurate.
States came very close to siding with the Axis in World War II. It could have gone either way.
And even John F. Kennedy, there's pictures of him hanging out with Nazis after the war when he's getting the space program running. So
to be fair, Jack didn't bring them over here.
It's everywhere. But
guys, right? Was already there.
So there's one in Parliament. Well, there's one with JFK. Well, I mean, you can keep going, and my God, let's work on solutions instead of focusing on all these. Well, look at this in 1947. Okay, come on.
I know. And I only bring up history because I truly believe that those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And I see so much historical ignorance. I mean, look at what just happened in the Canadian Parliament a few weeks ago, where every member of Parliament and your Prime Minister all claimed not to know who was fighting Russia in World War II. Are they really that uneducated? And if they are, I feel a responsibility to educate them.
Guys, I was so naive. I always, made fun of all the Jews who were pulling out the victim card, anti-Semitism. I thought it was a figment of their imagination until I saw some of the comments after October 7, even on our stream with Scott, like how much slur? And are people joking? Are they serious?
They said some terrible things towards
yeah,
you.
and I had no idea people felt that way. I was hoping that they were joking, but I couldn't imagine. One more thing about protests. It doesn't apply to the entire world, but at least it applies to San Francisco, Seattle. I don't think these protests are genuine. These people are protesting specifically here in San Francisco while there are drugged out homeless people laying right next to them. They're homeless. There are vacant businesses who haven't been refilled since the lockdowns. These people never even thought about coming out protesting. Are you telling me that they care that much about some obscure conflict, one of the many conflicts that are going on? There are problems in Kurdistan. There's problems in Kashmir. There are problems with Houthi rebels in Saudi Arabia. Are you telling me they really care that much about Gaza more? Give me a break.
Great point. And you know, these are the same woke liberals who were out there marching through San Francisco, you know, saying Slava Ukraini, and they love
or Black Lives Matter. They never met a black person. They've never had a black friend. They pushed them all out with they priced them all out to God knows where.
They're in Oakland. They can't afford to live in San Francisco.
Even further. And now they're chanting about racial justice. So there's a lot of hypocrisy. I'm not justifying what's going on with that. That's not a justification. I am with Rick. We should stop looking what happened 100 years, 300 years. Stop looking at property rights. Need to look at solutions because it's unproductive to look back. Just like what that guy from Hamas said is unproductive. War, resistance. Beautiful words. Where are they getting you?
Because as I've been trying to say over and I have been saying this over and over again, yes, it is important to know your history, but the most important thing we can learn from history is that we have to, at some point, let it go. Otherwise, you're doomed to repeat it because some people are determined to repeat it.
Let me talk about
relitigated over and over and over again. You know, after the war ended in World War II.
Did it?
Okay. Like it was over. So the killing had to stop. So it stopped. So let's let that lay where let's let that sleeping dog lie. Not dig up the dead Nazis. We've got real life Nazis we have to deal with right now. That's not helpful. It's not productive. Deal with the new guys because they're hiding behind all of that stuff. We've got a real problem, and these guys are getting away with lying and misrepresenting themselves. We've got real problems to deal with. We're not addressing that at all right now because we're focused on stuff that happened 78 years ago. This is not helpful. We've got a real emergency on our hands. Solutions today.
And
so we don't repeat the history.
And I hear that when Americans go to Vietnam, they're treated very well. So if Vietnam can forgive what happened 50 years ago, then who are we not to be able to forgive, right? And
Japan, for God's sake, we dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Japan, and yet we have good relations today for the most part.
Have we had any suicide kamikazes since World War II on our land from Japan? I don't think so. These are the most law-abiding, calm, respectful people ever. And we put them in internment camps during World War II. I haven't heard any requests for reparations.
And now Germany is our ally.
Yeah. Yeah. So everything can be forgiven if the mind is in the right place because there is no better option. There's no better option. And going 7 years, rehashing history, you kicked me out of my house. What to do? What's the is a lot of these Hamas people, they tell European Jews to go back home to Europe. Okay, well, what about the Sephardic Jews? More than 50% of Israel are Jews from Iraq, Morocco, Yemen. Apparently, they were kicked out from their houses in 1948, and they were told, you have a state. Go there now. Should they go back to Morocco, Yemen, and Iraq and Iran and reclaim their property, knock on those people's doors? How far back do you go?
Well, we could go all the way back to 1917 and the Balfour Declaration, which I personally believe was a horrible mistake. That's the root of all this problem today. And one last historical note. I actually believe whatever you may think of Joseph Stalin, I think that Stalin actually had the correct idea after World War II. He forbade Jews in the Soviet Union to emigrate to Israel because what he wanted to do was create autonomous zones inside the Soviet Union protected by the Red Army to make sure that there would be no more violence or incursions against the Jews. And I actually think that that made a lot more sense than, importing all of these European Jews into Arab land, or we can argue whose land it is, but the Arabs certainly saw it that way. I believe that that was a huge mistake, and we've been paying the price ever since on both sides. Your thoughts, Arkady?
Yeah. And this reminds me, we fail to look at people as a mixed bag. Bibi Netanyahu, Hamas leaders, Stalin, they're not 100% evil or 100% great. Everybody had great ideas. You don't become Stalin or Bibi or Hitler by being a complete idiot. So we can learn things from all of them. We don't have to kill millions of people. We don't have to repress freedom of speech, but we can learn a lot of things. And I mentioned it before. I don't think people think it's important or relevant, but just going, I have Palestinian friends here, going there to Palestinian territories when I'm in Israel, I make it a point to go. I like to see how they live, what they have to say. These are some of the most charismatic people. And I'm hoping more of them will put their charisma in the right direction, on the right track, regardless of politics, and their warmth that they have, the hospitality. And hopefully when things come down and when the peace is achieved, one of the wonderful things that the peace can bring is for the rest of the world to enjoy that unique one-of-a-kind place with one-of-a-kind culture. That includes Iran, Afghanistan. It's just painful that some of the most wonderful and unique and vibrant places are also the most messed up right now, politically and militarily.
So true. Some of the most beautiful places in the world are war zones right now. Russia, Ukraine, now the Middle East. I know we're running out of time, but I'd like to kind of bring the show to a close with a focus on the hostages. As far as we know, anyway, the count that we had was 203. I guess that's down to 201 now, because yesterday 2 American hostages were released, and the local TV station got to speak to the young lady's father. And I wanted you to hear.
Developing right now at 10, a Denver man's family kidnapped by Hamas nearly 2 weeks ago has been released by the terror group.
Yeah, this image you see right here, it shows the mother and daughter being escorted by Israeli military across the border. Fox 31's Talia Cunningham hearing from loved ones about their harrowing journey to safety. She's on it all new at 10.
Well, Andrea, this is the outcome that the Renan family was hoping for, the safe return of Judith and Natalie here. That's their reality. Family says that they're doing well tonight and in good spirits after a brief phone call and appear to have no major physical injuries, but they're currently at a hospital in Israel for observation. So Natalie and Judith Renan were visiting family in Israel when the rockets started going off back on October 7th and they were captured by Hamas. Ben Renan, who lives right here in Denver, told me last week that family last heard from his 17-year-old sister and stepmother that day, and they shared that they were actually hiding in their home, and that's when their phone shut off. According to the White House, they were released just this morning and are safely in the hands of Israeli authorities tonight. Just a few hours ago, Natalie's father and loved ones sharing their elation, saying this is the best day of their lives.
I haven't been sleeping for 2 weeks. Tonight I'm going to sleep good. I spoke with my daughter earlier today. She sounds very good. She looks very good. She was very happy, and she's waiting to come home. I'm going to hug her and kiss her, and it's going to be the best day of my life.
Yeah, it sure is. He added that prayer kept him going this whole time. 10 more Americans are still unaccounted for tonight, and more than 200 people are still being held hostage as of now. President Joe Biden says that he spoke with Judith and Natalie today, and they'll be reunited with their loved ones soon. Family says it should be sometime early next week, hoping that it's before October 24th, because that's when Natalie here will be celebrating her 18th birthday. In studio, Talia Cunningham, Fox 31. Yeah.
17 years old. And to go through a horrific experience like that, she's going to be scarred for the rest of her life. And apparently the story is that the Hamas terrorists let those two hostages go, those two particular hostages, because the mother was in poor health. That's what they say.
I'm actually quite optimistic about the fate of hostages, because I believe that Hamas is savvy enough and experienced enough to know that that's the only currency they have. Right. After the bombing and after it's all said and done, they will still want some of their prisoners back, right? So it wouldn't make any sense if you execute the hostages, you're going to unleash more rage, and then you won't be able to get your people out. So you might as well wait till Israel stops and then go back to the negotiating table. So I can't imagine who in the right mind would execute. This is basically like your cryptocurrency right now, except better in this situation.
Human bargaining chips.
Yeah.
How sad is that? But it's true. That's what they are. And of course, for older people like me, it brings back terrible memories of the Iranian hostage crisis of 1979, 1980. And, I do not understand why President Biden isn't taking a harder line on getting those hostages back. No ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. You give us back our American hostages right now, or we're going to rain down all hell upon you. That's just my feeling on it. What's yours?
Well, what is all hell? More of what Israel is doing? The movies make it look like it's for Americans special forces to go in and to rescue hostages. In reality, it's much harder. Are you going to sacrifice your Marines and your special forces to go to an unfamiliar territory to try to rescue hostages?
That's right. I mean, Jimmy Carter found out the hard way when he tried once to send in an expeditionary force, and it was a disaster.
Screw Google gave me a good. Now I'm going to change my Twitter handle to colonial apologist. That's going to be I thought it was going to be land grabber, but this is better.
Colonial apologist.
But guys, movies make it look much easier than the reality. So when these guys go into Gaza, the Israelis, into an urban warfare, every little noise they hear, they're going to freak out and they're going to unload a magazine of bullets. Many of those noises will be coming from animals, from leaves, or from innocent people. So prepare to see a lot of innocent random casualties. And that's just the unfortunate reality. There's no way around it.
There is a report that's been circulating today, unconfirmed by Israel, I should add, but it's coming from Hamas, saying that they tried to return, I believe, 2 Israeli hostages, and that Israel refused to accept them. Could you imagine that being true? And why would Israel do that?
I could only imagine it if what they asked for return was something that wasn't acceptable to Israel. But did they really offer here, take those 2 people, no strings attached? I can't imagine.
It's hard to imagine strings not being attached when they've made it very clear that they want all of their prisoners released from Israel. So maybe they were trying to trade a disproportionate number. We'll give you 2 and you give us 1,000. I could see that being unacceptable to Israel. That's not a very fair prisoner swap.
Also, I'm as harsh as it sounds. I don't think Israel wants to send a message that this is what you can do in the future. Kidnap a bunch of people, make demands, and then we'll return them in exchange for fulfilling our demands.
Right. Right.
So
it is a very difficult situation, and I'm afraid that it may be. Let's hope that it's not going to be a year like it was in 1979. Let's hope that their captivity is ended as soon as possible, and that this doesn't drag on and on and on. And I fear for the safety of those hostages if this ground invasion goes forward, and it looks like it will. How are they going to keep their bargaining chips safe?
I'm honestly surprised that the media is not focusing more attention on the hostage issue.
Right.
I think they're giving Biden a pass.
Interesting. I do have a question to you guys. One question. Why is there so much coverage of this? Complete blackout 24/7 on all channels. Palestine, Israel, Gaza, Gaza, Gaza all day. I mean, Americans don't care about anything else for 2 weeks?
You know, that's interesting to note, Arkady, because in all of the public opinion polls that I've seen so far in this election cycle, foreign policy, the war in Ukraine, the Israel-Palestine situation, at least until 2 weeks ago, was of concern to only 2% of Americans. 2%, less than 2%. So now, yeah, all of a sudden the media is telling you you should care. And of course you should. But it's just interesting, isn't it?
That much. Yeah. It's just disproportionate. Looks like way more than Ukraine, way more than COVID even. So that's very interesting. Maybe soon we'll have the ticker of how many people died and how many people injured, just like we used to have during COVID on both sides. So
true. And it's interesting how everybody suddenly developed amnesia about the war in Ukraine. It's like that's not even going on according to the media. It's all over. Look over here. Forget over there. Look over here. So, Rick, any final thoughts before we close out?
No, guys, I'm just grateful to both Don and Arkady.
Thank you for having me.
Very good conversation.
This was really enlightening, and I wanted to do this in a way that, you know, each of you got an hour to explain your position rather than making it a debate. I know that social media loves conflict. I think there's been enough conflict the last 2 weeks. We've seen nothing but conflict on every podcast, on every news channel. Everyone's trying to whip things up, stir things up. And the problem is we aren't listening to each other. We aren't listening to the other side. And so I want to thank all of you for listening to the other side, no matter which side you're on, or maybe you haven't chosen a side. But it's important that you hear the perspectives of both sides. And I believe that you, the viewers, are the jury. And we've just presented a case. Obviously, Arkady's an attorney. He can make a great case. Don DeBar also makes a very strong case, even though he's not an attorney. But you've heard both sides, and the rest is up to you to decide.
Thank you, guys. And having said that, if somebody wants a debate, I'm totally up for it. I promise to be respectful and cool, but at the same time, make it productive and engaging. I'm not afraid of a live debate, so keep me in mind for the future. Okay.
Well, we will have some debates. In fact, I think Don DeBar challenged you to a debate, so we may just have to do that. It would be engaging and interesting. But Arkady, you're always interesting. I enjoy watching you on American and Crimea, Kevin Michellizi's channel very much. And I really am so glad to have you on the show. And we will.
Thank you, Lori. Likewise, I'm always happy to come. If anything comes up where I can be of service, don't hesitate.
Excellent. Excellent. We will take you up on that. And Rick Walker, thank you. Thanks to Don DeBar. And once again, thanks to everybody out there for watching Strange Bedfellows tonight. We'll see you back here next Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Until then, peace.
In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes Strange Bedfellows.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.